Hey folks, it's Katie. Thanks for joining us for the Texas Counts weekly update. We missed you last week, so we're excited to get things up and running again this week. As you know, we're going to wait a minute or so for folks to hop on the call, but thank you again so much for joining us, and we will get started momentarily. We're just going to give it one more minute. I think I threw people off this week with our new password, which is Texas. So I believe if you're on the Zoom call, you figured that out. But I've just heard of situations where Zoom calls have been taken over. So just adding an extra level of protection for folks on the call. And I think that we are going to go ahead and get started. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us for this week's Texas Counts Weekly Update. As you know, today is June 1st. But before we get started kind of into our regularly programmed census conversations, I did want to take a moment to just pause. In this work, we are afforded the opportunity to connect with a really diverse group of Texans from across the state. And honestly, it's easily been the best part of my job to connect with all of y'all. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, your communities, as well as be partners in this work. This past week has been really difficult, to say the least. Millions of folks across our country have been raising their voices in response to the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the countless Black lives lost to senseless violence, as well as the ongoing problems of unequal justice in our country. Our communities are hurting, and they have been hurting. So to our Black, African-American folks of color in our Get Out the Count family, we see you, we hear you, and we are your allies in this work and moving forward. And I believe Genesis, if you wanted to share something as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Katie. And I also want to echo what Katie has shared. I think that, all of us on the call we jumped on to do census work because we really believe and know that this work can make a tangible difference in the lives of our communities. And so I want to also, I hope, remind us, right, that the work we do is very important and will have a very long lasting impact on our communities, but in particular our communities of color and our Black communities. I think sometimes, I know I for sure have been working on the census for the past year, and so sometimes it can get a little repetitive and we hear the same things over and over again. But when it comes down to it, the census is about power and money, but it's also about alleviating conditions like poverty, homelessness, lack of infrastructure, lack of resources. And all of those things are very material things that it can improve the lives of our communities. So I want us to all, reflect on that and also reflect on how we can continue to interrogate the work that we do and how we do it, so that we can better the conditions for not only all communities of color, but Black communities in particular. And so we know that, we're not always going to have it right, but I think we should continue to challenge ourselves to do the right thing, and to keep forward with that vision in mind. And with that, I think we can keep going. But if anybody has any questions or wants to continue the conversation, please let us know.
Thank you, Genesis. And again, know that your Texas Counts Get Out the Count family is always here for you. So please let us know if you need anything. We are always happy to support you. As you know, for folks that have been joining us, we are a panel of 3. And so Genesis, who just spoke from the Leo Educational Fund, Dr. Lila Valencia from the Texas Demographic Center, and then I am Katie Martin Lightfoot. And some exciting news is that my organization actually just rebranded. And so I no longer work for the Center for Public Policy Priorities. I now work for Every Texan Counts. We are the same organization. We are still committed to our mission, but we really wanted to put our social justice work really towards the forefront, because we know that social justice requires public policy. I'm a big fan of the rebrand, just because Every Texan Counts has a really nice ring to it, but did want to share out about that change for our organization. In addition, we are also joined by Miss Jo Lynn Turner from the Community Health Choice. Super excited to have her on the call today. She's out of Houston and is going to be sharing some really great Get Out the Count strategies for folks to implement. And as always, our schedule typically runs the same. Again, welcome everyone to today's call. Genesis will run us through some 2020 census updates. There have been quite a few operational updates in Texas as of late. Lila will take us through the data. We'll have JoLynn speak, and then we'll wrap up with a conversation about the Texas Counts road trip. As always, you know that we love your questions and comments, so please feel free to use that chat box and Q&A box as well. And for our friends joining us on Facebook Live, please submit your questions, comments there as well. But we will go ahead and get started. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today.
Okay, it's me again, everybody. Awesome. So thanks again for joining us. I know a few things have actually transpired in the census world, so let's get right into it. The Census Bureau has opened and continues to resume their in-field operations all over the country, but in particular here in Texas. All of the counties that are listed here are now resuming these operations. The operations include things like hiring, which includes fingerprinting, training of those hires. It also includes having their field staff back in offices where they can have capacity, and then also the update leave operation that we've talked so much about. Again, the Bureau is doing this in a phased kind of way, so they're doing it in coordination with federal, state, and local health officials. So at this point, we've actually had almost all of the offices open here, the ACOs, as they refer to them here in Texas. The last remaining ones are both in Houston and El Paso. So those are 2 pretty significant regions. We're hopeful that by the end of this week, they'll let us know about these 2 areas as well. But as you can see, I just took a quick snapshot of the ACO reopening that the Census Bureau sent to us and that they published on their website. Where there's an X, it refers to a place where update leave isn't relevant or non-applicable. But in these other areas where you see the numbers, this is how many households they anticipate and estimate there will be in the update leave universe. So as you can see, some of the areas are a little heavier than others. And hopefully by the end of the week, and I know Dr. Valencia is going to talk about this a little bit more, but hopefully as this operation resumes, we'll see a big bump in our self-response rates across the state, and maybe more importantly in these regions that haven't seen such a big bump, but fingers crossed. So with that new update leave guideline, as I mentioned on previous calls, the Bureau will have, their operation is now contactless. So contactless, yeah. So before it was supposed to be that a census employee would go to the door and knock, but now they're not gonna knock, they're just gonna leave material and they'll do a visual inspection of the property to update their roster. And the idea behind kind of a visual inspection is that they wanna see, okay, are we missing, you know, that weird extra small house in the back? Is there something that, you know, are there two homes on this property? Did we miss something like that? So it's not supposed to be anything invasive, just something very quick that folks can look at so that they can go back and update as needed. The Census Bureau created a flyer for communities in update leave. And so I'll link to that in the chat once I'm done with the updates. And another thing I just wanted to remind folks is that NRFU, non-response follow-up is set to resume in August as it stands. So we have the month of June and July to really continue to get the count out. And, you know, we might want to take this moment to also remind folks, right, that the Bureau will go back out and they will start knocking on doors eventually in the summer. And so we want to make sure that folks, you know, that our community members know who's going to be out in their community as well. Next slide, please. Awesome. So I also wanted to share some of the new resources that Nalero Educational Fund has created. Anybody can access these, share these, put these out however they see fit. So the first one is that my colleagues in California have created a set of webinars called Virtual Organizing for the 2020 Census. These happen every Tuesday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. They're both in English and in Spanish. And so they alternate. Every other week is Spanish and every other week is English. So feel free to register. The idea behind this is that we know many of us were not doing virtual digital organizing, and so we want to make sure to have those tools available to our partners. We also updated our Census 101 fact sheets. So if you find these useful, feel free to use them however you see fit. They're linked here both in English and Spanish. And I know that many of us will continue the work along GOTV, getting out the vote as well. And so if you maybe don't have a plan yet, or you know, you're thinking about how can we also spread the word about GOTV, feel free to, you can use our platform, our text platform, so you can throw the Go Vote or Ve y Vota information and send it out to your community members as well. Next slide. And then a few other updates from our partners. So the Brennan Center a few weeks back created what they call How Changes to the 2020 Census Timeline Will Impact Redistricting. We know a lot of folks have questions about this, and the Brennan Center always comes out with really strict to the point and easy accessible kind of articles on things like this. So we're really happy that they created something along these lines. H Code Media created a survey called The Digital Lives of US Hispanics During COVID-19. So they took a survey of Hispanics during this time to figure out how we're online, how we're consuming media. And the idea behind sharing this is that we hope that folks who are thinking about how can I reach this community, think about where they are, right? So I find it to be really helpful and very also quick and to the point. Our partners over at Faith in Public Life were set to have their week of action this week, but they're actually pushing it a week back given the circumstances around the protests. And so they want to give space to their Black communities to take a moment to, and acknowledging that right now, people are not going to maybe thinking about the census right now. So they do have a toolkit. So if you are part of a community of faith and you find it useful, feel free to plug in and tweet or join some of their conversations next week. June is also Pride Month. So the task force will host a week of action this actually just changed. The task force is going to be hosting the week of action from the week of June 22nd. They're also postponing it to give space for folks. They have not come out with any kind of toolkit for this specific week, but as they produce things, we'll make sure to send them along. And then finally, from the Population Reference Bureau, they're hosting a webinar called Targeting Areas to Improve the Count of Young Children in the 2020 Census. This is tomorrow, so feel free, I'm sorry, this is for Wednesday, so feel free to jump on and register as well if you find this, if you think this might be interesting. They've created a whole set of new resources for this moment, and so I think that they'll be sharing those in that webinar. And as always, if there's anything here that you have any questions on or you'd like to see more of, please let us know and we'd be happy to do that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Genesis. And as always, we'll make sure that you have access to the slide deck so you can access all the great links that Genesis just shared out. It looks like that we don't have any specific questions around what Genesis shared out. If you do, as always, pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. But it looks like we can move right into Dr. Valencia's presentation and walk us through the self-response data in Texas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. I'm going to share a little bit of information with you on self-response. So if we go on to the next slide, please. And just a reminder, the links what I am sharing, the information that I am sharing is included in all of these links. And so you can refer to them on your own and look at any specific areas or more granular detail for any of your areas as well. Next slide, please. So Texas has reached a bit of a milestone. On Friday, we were able to get past the 55% of self-response rate of households having submitted a self-response to the 2020 census. So I'm excited. We keep moving forward. We are still below the national average, and as you can see, we are well behind the national average with over 5 percentage points. And even though our responses are trickling in, much like the nation had a self-response rate of 60.4 for about 3 consecutive days. This last week. So, responses are trickling in everywhere. They're not, big spikes, but, we still are a little bit farther behind than other states. In fact, we are now tied for 41st. Our ranking has reached as high as 38th, but in the last few days, we've actually been dropping in ranking. And you might recall when the update leave operations began to be reinstated in other states before Texas, I sort of anticipated that this could happen, that Texas could begin to drop in ranking because of other states catching up in terms of their update leave operation. So right now we have had self-responses come in from 6.7 million households. In the country, we have responses from 89.4 million households. And again, the links are there. You can go to the self-response map, and then you can also access the rankings from the map there. Next slide, please. This is the self-response and daily increase for Texas as well as the US. And so you'll recall that when we started, we were about 2.9 percentage points behind the national response rate. We are now 5.3 percentage points behind the response rate. So you can see here that our responses really are trickling in, those shorter bars, but you can also see that it's a similar experience for the US. So there really is a need to really motivate and push for increased response rate in the state of Texas. Like I said, we've got 55.1% of households that responded, and so that means we have another 45% that really have yet to respond. Next slide, please. We now have, I'm sorry, I recently changed this in the slide deck, and so you'll get the updated material. This Monday has been a pretty chaotic start for me, but this is from last week's, but the new information is in our updated slides. And when those go out, you should have the updated information. But for the state of Texas, we now have 70 counties that have over 50% plus response rates. And this map here, you see that there's a lot of the darker brown shaded areas, especially across South Texas and in parts of the Panhandle and around the El Paso or to the east of El Paso County. Like Genesis mentioned, those counties still do not have their update leave operation, the ones around El Paso, but the ones in the lower part of the Panhandle, in right in the middle of West Texas, as well as the ones across South Texas between the Rio Grande Valley and the San Antonio area. Those darker brown areas, I'm keeping an eye out because operations for update leave have been reinstated now. And so the new map actually shows improvements for Webb County in particular, as well as a few other counties in that area. And I'll keep an eye on those and report sort of the progress in those areas as this update leave operation continues. Next slide, please. And this is the rankings. And I think I didn't get a chance to switch out this slide either. And I apologize. This Monday has been a little chaotic for me, but I have that updated in the slide deck now. So when you receive that, you'll see this information. And unfortunately, there hasn't been much shift. You know, the only shift that has changed in terms of ranking by county for Texas is that we now have 70 counties that have 50% of their households counted. And there are a few other counties that are really, really close to that, to reaching that 50% threshold. And like I said, you will have this updated in the set of slides that go out in the email. Next slide, please. I did want to share and go over some of I had shared with you last week, the top 20 Hispanic census tracts with the lowest response rates. The ones that I have listed here did not include update leave, but what I have been doing in terms of an analysis since update leave was reinstated in different parts of the state, I took specifically the census tracts that are in the Rio Grande Valley, in the South Texas part of the Rio Grande Valley, right? So Hidalgo County, like Genesis mentioned, Cameron County, as well as Willacy and Starr County. And I looked at the ones that have more than 20% or 20% or more update leave. And because the update leave program was reinstated there last week, I wanted to see what the change in their response rate was. And the good news is that they increased their response rate from that 5/8 date, May 8th date, to this last 5/29 date or May 29th date. And they have increased their response rate by well over 2 percentage points, or about 2 percentage points. Some of the areas have increased it by more than 2 percentage points. And so that's good to see. Unfortunately, the average for the low response rates and high update leave census tracts, the average response rate is still about 20%. And so it's really important that we get those areas aware that update leave is back in session. And census enumerators are dropping off packets at their doors. And so it's important that they're made aware of this so that we can start to see those upticks in response. As Genesis noted in the table that she shared, there's about 48,800 households in the update leave universe in the Rio Grande Valley counties alone. So we know that there's a good number of households there that we can reach out to encourage them to respond that had not had that opportunity before. Next slide, please. The newest area that has had their update leave operation reinstated is the Laredo area census office. the number of households that was listed in that table that Genesis shared showed 79,000 households in the Update Leave program for this stretch of Texas alone. So this is going to be hugely important. They will start to receive their packets this week. So, but we anticipate that we'll see increases in response rate in those census tracts, and I will provide an update to you next week and in the coming weeks to see what kind of jumps we're seeing in those census tracts with Update Leave and with low self-response, with the lowest self-response, to show you sort of how that is moving along and progressing. But we also need your help in letting people in these areas know that Update Leave is starting this week in South Texas, and they need to check their doorsteps, they need to check their gates and make sure that those packets will be, that those packets are delivered to them and that they are able to respond as quickly as possible. And yes, Rafael, the packets are being physically delivered by census workers this week. So they usually take the first couple of days after this area census office is opened to train people and instruct them on this new sort of social distancing Update Leave program. All of the enumerators that are dropping off these Update Leave packets will have masks, they will have hand sanitizers, and they will be leaving the packets physically at people's gates, at people's doorsteps. They will not be attempting to make connection with the person that lives in the household so that they can remain socially distant, but those packets will be delivered this week, probably as early as Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So please reach out to your networks, and then next week I will report back to you on what that response rate increase is for those census tracts in this area as well. Next slide, please. And as always, we encourage you to please use your social media networks to follow us, the Texas Demographic Center, at Texas Demography on Twitter. And we're also on Facebook. And we post those self-response rates daily after, it's usually between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you want to, see how your area is doing and share sort of our response rates to your networks on your social media sites, we would really appreciate it. We really do feel that when different areas, geographic areas, are sort of called out or tagged on social media, a larger set of eyes are on that, and there is a possibility that there will be more responses around that. So we encourage you to share those response rates, look for them on our social media. I know Texas Counts generally shares those out as well, and feel free to share with your networks too. And I think that's all I have for my slides, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
So we have a,
go ahead, Genesis.
Oh, I wanted to point out a question from Elena. So she asked, have you guys heard of anyone moving forward with public in-person events with the relaxation of stay-at-home orders? And then she mentioned coordinating a census parade, but that some local officials are hesitant to get on board. And so if any folks on the call are doing something similar and had some of the same hiccups, please feel free to share more. We'd love to hear about how you coordinated these efforts and how successful they were. I have heard of my colleagues in places like North Carolina and in California doing similar events. I don't know how successful they were, but they did get permission to do so. So hopefully other folks have some experience with that. As far as doing a lot of public in-person events, we do, or I will, I'll say I do recommend that everyone continue to abide by their own organization's rules on that. I know for me, for example, the rules around being in person are very strict. And as you can imagine, a lot of organizations don't want to be liable for anyone getting sick or hurt during this time. So just keep that in mind as you also organize your events in the near future, and what those dates will look like, but also what the permission looks like according to your own organization. And then I think we answered some of the questions.
There's one question on what is update leave.
I'll tackle it. There's also, before that, I wanna, okay, I'll come back to that. So update leave is the process, is one of the modes of not sending, but leaving material at the door for folks who may not have a lot of internet connectivity, that traditionally have PO boxes, and they're considered a part of this update leave universe. In that process, the census officials don't send them anything because there's typically not an address to send them to. So they actually go to the door. And in this year's process, they'll leave packets of material. It should be an internet choice, not internet first, which means that the packet will come with a printed questionnaire. Many of them are bilingual, and you can look at that through a hard to count map as well. And so the idea behind this is that some of these, as I mentioned in the previous slides, a lot of our communities have not received any kind of communication from the Census Bureau directly at their doors until this week or last week. And so in that process, the Bureau hopes to update the address to make sure that they have confirmed that they left the material, that there are folks who are living there, but they won't talk to them. It's a contactless operation this year. And then with that, people will start to respond by either mailing back the packet or going online with their identification code. So, and if folks still have a lot of questions around update leave, please let me know. I'm happy to host a separate webinar on update leave or any of these other operational pieces so we can answer more of these questions as well.
And I think there was another question, Genesis, about the county rankings for all counties in Texas. I'm assuming it's in Texas, but yes, you can absolutely get the county rankings, not from the HTC data map. They don't actually rank them, but you can get it from the self-response map from the Census Bureau. At the top right corner, they have a rankings link. Just double click on that link and you'll get the full rankings, and you can look at the rankings across the country for the counties, or you can look at the rankings for a particular state. You can also look at the rankings by city, and then you can adjust for population thresholds. If you're interested in looking at large cities or small cities, you can get those kinds of rankings as well.
Awesome. And then there was another question on when, can you clarify when update leave will resume in Hudspeth County? So I think not.
That's El Paso. It's right by El Paso. And so I don't know what you've heard, Genesis, about El Paso.
So I haven't heard anything internally or from the Bureau themselves, but as I mentioned earlier, the two remaining big areas in Texas that have not opened up their ECOs are El Paso and Houston. So we're not totally sure. We're hopeful that it'll happen pretty soon. The idea was that most of these operations would resume on the week of June 1st, and here we are. And so hopefully within a few days, we'll hear. As a reminder, the Census Bureau is announcing kind of the phased return of their offices every Friday. And so that's why we report every Monday. And Charlene McBride shares here that it might be June 8th. So that's not too far away, and they'll probably announce that this Friday.
Great, thank you, Genesis and Lila, for fielding so many questions. You know we love your questions, so please keep submitting them to the Q&A box, chat box, or on Facebook as well. Now we are excited to switch gears and talk a little bit about Get Out the Count efforts, and we are very excited to have Jolyn Turner joining us from Community Health Choice. They have been doing some really great work around the census and producing some really awesome resources that are easily shareable. So I am going to pass it over to Jolynn to walk us through the great work that they're doing. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and nice to meet everyone virtually. My name is Jolynn Turner. I'm the Director of Business Development at Community Health Choice, and I specifically oversee our HHSC program, so Medicaid and CHIP. Next slide. So why is this important to us? So a little bit about Community. Some of you may know who we are and some may not. So Community is a local in Houston managed care organization. We're not for profit. We have about 388,000 Medicaid and Marketplace lives. So currently we offer programs for STAR, CHIP, CHIP Paranate, and then we also have a Marketplace. We have multiple Marketplace programs that cover about 93,000 lives of those 388,000. We operate in the Harris and Jefferson service areas. So that is big cities, Houston, and then Beaumont, and those surrounding counties. So it's a total of 20 counties that we operate in. And so when, census came up and it was the year of the census, this was something that we immediately knew was very important to our communities. Again, a majority of our membership is low income. They qualify for services like Medicaid and CHIP, and we do know historically that underserved populations are typically undercounted. And so we really wanted to take this on, really to notify our membership, to let them know that, it's so important to complete census, why it's so important, and just really how it ultimately benefits everybody. And so what we did was we decided, to look at and focus on two specific populations. So again, we knew that historically, kids 0 to 5 were typically undercounted. And so we decided to focus on member households with children that had 0 to 5 age members in the home. And then we also decided we'd do a second approach for historically low responding zip codes. So what we did for that was we translated the census tracts into zip codes. And so there are tracts, obviously, when you do that, because they're not done by zip code for a reason. When you do that, there is some duplication. So there are some zip codes that are covered in multiple census tracts. But when we looked at that, it was a total of 62 zip codes in our service areas for Harris and Jefferson that we were really going to target, because we knew that based on census data for 2010, these had been, again, low response zip codes in our service area. And so what are we doing? We decided to kind of do multiple touch points related to census education. And so it looks like a lot of different things for our membership. So the first thing is we created a postcard, and I'll show you all what the postcard looks in a future slide. But we created a postcard that really just was short and simple and reiterated the importance to our membership of completing the census. We sent that out again to all member households with children that had 0 to 5 age members. We also did an email that went out. And that email actually went out to a number. It was over 61,000 of our members received that email. We did social media posts, and we continue to do social media posts. We had a piece of our member website that I'll also show you that we added in, so that as members or visitors that come to our website are able to kind of look at some of that census information. We included it in our member newsletters that go out quarterly. And then we also had the outreach team distribute. And of course, with everything happening with COVID, there have been some changes as it relates to the work that we're doing out in the community. It's very, very limited, if at all. And so that has sort of impacted the mode of the outreach team distributing. However, I think with all the other ways that we are distributing this information, luckily we have those as options. And so hopefully there hasn't been too much of a disruption. And then one of the different things that we also did was, because we are a managed care organization, we also have a network of physicians, a very large network of physicians. And so what we decided to do was also communicate the importance of our census, the importance of completing the census, and the fact that we were also promoting it amongst our membership to our physicians in our network. And so we added it to our provider website as a reminder. We added an article in our provider newsletter as a reminder to our providers as well. And then we also partnered with our provider relations staff, specifically to be able to identify for that first subset of children 0 to 5. We looked at who were those members tied to from a PCP standpoint. So of those members that had been identified, who were their PCPs? And for the really large ones, we made sure to do direct outreach to let them know, hey, just a reminder, the census is coming. We've notified our membership. Don't forget, it's also great if you can promote it. So we had that kind of discussion. And I think that's really unique for us to have really focused on both of those subset of our customers. So next slide, please. All right, so this is what our flyer looked like that we created and that has been shared with community partners as well as out in the community as we identify our members. So we really decided, this campaign around You Count, the importance of every person counts, every one of our members counts. And so just letting them know again that the count started on April 1st, giving them an estimate of the dollars that are left on the table for every person that is not counted on the census. Reminding them again that census is not going to ask about immigration status for our population, everything that happened with public charge, and then everything that happened with trying to have a question added to the census related to immigration status. That was a big deal, and we felt that that was very important to our membership and very important that we communicate to our members that, the census isn't going to ask you for immigration status, and also that it is illegal really for anyone that's working for the census to share any of that type of information. Next slide, please. So this is the member postcard that went out. So the front is the You Count again. And then the bottom part is what the postcard actually read, which again was just very short and to the point. It starts on April 1st. It's very important that you complete it. And this postcard actually went out to, again, as I mentioned, that 0 to 5 age household. And it went out to 83,000 of our members. Next slide, please. So this is the community website. So on our website, when you go to communityhealthchoice.org, you have a banner, like rotating banners at the very top of our website. So one of the rotating banners is this You Count piece. And if you click on Learn More, it gives specific information. It has a short video about the census and how to complete it that comes from the Census Bureau. And then it also kind of gives just these important time frames and reminders to everyone about completing the census. We also had a pop-up that was added to our website so that when people came on, it asked, or reminded them, don't forget to complete your census. And so this member website, we feel, is a really great place for them to just, again, remind them. We're able to direct people here, and it's been really great. So we've also done, as I mentioned before, social media. So we've done, not only did we promote, or do we continue to promote completing the census via our social media pages, but we've also done Facebook polls. So we did one Facebook poll prior to our mailing that just said, have you completed the census? And it asked people to respond via emojis. And so whether they had or they hadn't, the great news is that a majority of the people that responded had completed the census or had commented that they had not yet, but they were planning to. And so we really just rolled out a second Facebook poll, and that we wanted to see if that really shifted or changed at all after they received the mailing. So that has recently been posted on our Facebook page. We also at this time, because as I mentioned before, our outreach team really is not out in the field with everything going on with COVID. One of the things that they have been doing and working on is calls to our membership to remind them that recertification for Medicaid and CHIP at this time has been extended because of COVID. However, they are going to have to recertify, and the importance of, all the documentation that they will need. And during those calls, we're also reminding our members, don't forget to complete the census if you have not already. So just, repeated reminders to our membership. And then we're also working with our local partners to identify the low respondent zip codes for 2020. So currently, really looking at, based on the buckets that we had initially established, right? So that 0 to 5 household, and then the second bucket being historically low zip codes. We wanted to also see, are there, as of right now, looking at live data, Are there zip codes that we really need to even do almost like a different type of attempt, or maybe a third, you know, bucket that we need to create, for lack of better words, to really target specifically those areas to, again, create messaging and remind our members that live in those specific areas how important it is to complete the census, and maybe even referring them to some of our local partners who are assisting with that process. And besides that, I think one of the really important parts for every organization is that even though we're doing all this for our customers, which are our members and our providers, it's really important for a company our size. You know, we have about almost 800 employees, really around reminding our employees as well how important it is to complete the census, everything that, you know, the census funds, and everything that, how important it is. And so that's something else that we're working on internally, is really just messaging for our associates and our staff at Community Health Choice, reminding them if they haven't completed the census to complete it, that it's very important. Yeah, and so I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. I feel that it's been very well received. We have had members that have, you know, told us how much they like the information, how helpful it is. We also, I hate to keep saying this, but because of COVID, we have member advisory groups that occur on a quarterly basis. And so first quarter, we were only able to host one of the 4 that we do for our service areas. But that one, we actually partnered with a local organization that is doing a lot of work around census. And so they sent out a representative. He was great, very informative, and he gave our members that participated in our member advisory group a presentation around census, the importance, you know, questions they might have, kind of walk them through what the questions that would be asked, and how, you know, how important, what all programs were funded by census, really helpful information. And so he presented that to that first group that we were able to meet with, and we had some very positive responses as well from members, really appreciating that, you know, we're taking the time to let them know. And also I was very happy that a majority of the members that we heard from our member advisory group meetings also had communicated that, you know, they understood the importance of completing the census, and they were planning to complete the census. So that's all I have for today. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Oh, next slide, that has my contact information. I noticed the cover, or the introduction slide, didn't complete my email address. So this is my full email address. I'm happy to share any of the materials or go into more detail around anything if y'all have any specific questions that you'd like to talk more about. I should have mentioned, and I'm sorry I didn't, for the emails that were sent out, we did find that we had, we sent out, as I mentioned, 61,000 emails initially. And of those 61,000, we had a 40% open rate, which is a really good open rate for emails that go out, you know, to folks from organizations.
Thank you, Jolyn. And we do have one quick question. I think you might have touched on this, but Raphael is interested if y'all have done any phone banking, and if you've used the Cole Internet Directory.
So no, we have not used the Call Bank Internet Directory. And I wouldn't say, I mean, even though we're incorporating it into our calls that the outreach team is making, I wouldn't say that we have a formal kind of strategy related to any type of outbound calls. I oversee the outreach team, and so, you know, they're the ones that have been tasked with being out in the field and communicating this information. They were actually trained prior to census season starting, so that we also were knowledgeable and understood census and the process. And so they have been, you know, asking that question and reminding membership as they are calling for other reasons, but I wouldn't say that we have approached it from like a formal standpoint of all outbound calls reminding about the census at this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jolyn. And if anyone does have any questions, again, feel free to pop them into the chat box. And she shared lots of really great resources. And so we'll make sure that y'all have access to those to share with your community members as well. So thanks again, Jolyn.
For having me, I appreciate it.
Okay, so I kind of, spoiler alert, I clicked too quickly, but I think that we had shared in our most recent newsletter that we were planning on having the Texas Counts road trip the week of June 15th. With that in mind, we did know that was 2 weeks away, and given kind of the current state of our country right now, again, we wanted to be respectful of what's happening and kind of move things back a little bit. And so our goal is probably going to be doing the road trip the week of June 22nd. Again, we're in the process of finalizing some graphics and shareable content that we'll be getting to you this week. But we are planning to we are no longer hosting the road trip the week of the 15th, and I believe we'll tentatively be doing it the week of the 22nd. So wanted to share that with y'all on the call, and again, we'll make sure that you get the finalized date. I know we keep promising this to you, and the world is ever changing, and we're adapting to that. And as a reminder, again, we're going on this virtual road trip. We're going to be visiting the different regions of Texas to bring awareness to the census, but also what makes different areas unique. In terms of the week of celebration, and I'm also watching the clock, so I know we have about 8 minutes left, and I want to save some room for questions as well. I walked y'all through this 2 weeks ago, but as a reminder, we'll be highlighting a different region or regions of Texas each day of the week. We'll start off the day with a kickoff rally, and then we'll have 3 to 5 programmed events that are fun and engaging. So again, kind of pulling us out of the realm of traditional get out the count events and doing things a little bit more fun. So thinking about cultural celebrations, food, music, dance, art, nature, stories, celebrating diversity. And so again, maybe we'll be going into someone's kitchen out in El Paso, and we're learning a tamale recipe, or maybe we're heading to Galveston, and we're taking a walk along the beach. And so again, kind of thinking outside of their traditional typical census events and letting us really explore how diverse and wonderful our state is. And while we are going to be doing that more structured programming, again, we want this to be a day of action for our regions, very similar to Census Day. And so folks who are in our Texas Counts community, but also folks that are outside of that who can get involved and get out the count efforts, we want unlimited efforts happening in areas. And so again, thinking about our trusted voices, creating and leading content that meets the needs of target audiences. So maybe that's you doing your own social media campaign. Maybe that's some safe local in-person community tactics. For example, maybe that's when you're sharing or giving out emergency food, that's putting in a flyer about the census, or maybe it's everyone having yard signs up, or maybe I know that we've been talking about parades, car parades, which seem fun. Maybe your community can do it around the census. And then last but not least, of course, is social media. And so we will be doing a very heavy social media blitz throughout this week with lots of fun graphics and hashtags. So again, we're working on finalizing a lot of those things this week, and really excited to share them with you very, very soon. And then as a reminder, this is probably going to be the week following, but we are going to keep the regions on these days. So we'll be visiting the Gulf Coast in East Texas on Monday. Again, each day of the week, we will have a kickoff rally. We'll have about 2 to 3 scheduled Texas Counts events. And then we'll also have a large kind of statewide event towards the end of the day. Think about these as kind of our quote unquote after hours events. And so something fun like maybe a margarita competition between the regions. Maybe we're having singers, are artists or dancers performing. So again, bringing a celebration back at the end of the day as to celebrating Texas, and maybe adding some more competition into that as well. Tuesday, we'll be heading to South Texas in the RGV. Wednesday, we'll be going to the Panhandle, West Texas. Thursday, we'll be going to North Texas, and then we're rounding off our week in Central Texas and the Hill Country. So again, we will promise we'll send the updated the updated week for this event, but do know moving forward, these are the days those regions will be hosted. Moving right along, again, I wanted to put these regions in here just so you know what region you're in. Again, we know Texas is really, really big, and we tried to carve up our state in a way that seemed to make a little bit of sense. So these are the different counties in our regions. And again, we'll make sure that you have access to this slide deck so you can see what day of the week you get to celebrate on. And then in terms of our assignments, again, we'll share that updated weekly schedule. This week, we're also starting our heavy outreach to folks. And so first, thank you to everyone who has been able to fill out that interest form. It has been extremely helpful to help us start planning this event. And so we'll be getting in touch with you very soon. But you can still respond to it. The link is right there. I'll make sure I include it in our follow-up email as well. So if you are interested in hosting an event or being part of this process, please let us know. But do also know that I know kind of where you are regionally in Texas, and so I'll be reaching out to you and providing some tools and resources for you to really have a successful regional celebration on your day of the week. And so again, thank you for wanting to be a part of this process and hanging in there with us. We're really excited to be visiting everyone in their communities throughout the course of our road trip. And then as a reminder, we do our Texas Counts weekly update calls every Monday at noon. We missed you last week, and we're happy that you're with us again this week. And I know that everyone on the line or on the Zoom call knows that we do have a new password. Again, it's just Texas with a capital T. And for our Facebook friends who don't need a password, just know if you want to join us back in Zoom land, we do have a password on this meeting as well. We have 3 minutes left. And so again, if anyone does have any additional remaining questions regarding anything we've discussed today, the call is open to you. And again, we look forward to sending out more communications about the road trip. And then of course, looking forward to connecting with you again next Monday. And then let's see. Yes, of course, we'll definitely be sending out links to everyone for the different, we shared a lot of information today, so we'll make sure that you get access to all of those. And Genesis was amazing and popped a lot of those in the chat box as well. Great. Well, Genesis, I don't think I'm seeing any additional questions unless you are, but we might wrap up a couple minutes early.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions.
I think one maybe just came in, or maybe I made that up.
Maria Camacho commented that I see that our region falls into 2 areas. Maria, are you in the Rio Grande Valley? Hey Maria, don't be shy. Feel free to send Katie an email about that if you have any questions or comments about it. I'm pretty sure she'd be more than happy to discuss it and to talk more through that. Oh, okay. So she says yes, RGV and Hill County.
Okay. Let me follow, Maria, I'll follow up with you about that to see if we can get some clarity around that. Like I said, we tried our best to carve up our regions, but let me follow up with you and we'll find the right solution for that particular situation. Thanks for pointing that out. Cool. Well, thanks again, everyone, so much for joining us today. Again, I know that these are really difficult times we're in, and we appreciate you joining us today. And I hope that everyone is able to take care of themselves, their friends and families during this time, and sending lots of love your way. And we'll look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thanks, everyone.